Welcome to the Pastor G show. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am Lindani Gumede, also known as Pastor G. Some people would prefer calling me G. I am so fine with you calling me G. But yeah, I am an associate pastor in one of the churches here in Cape Town, and so they call me Pastor G at the church. One of the questions that a lot of people have been asking me would be, what is the best Bible translation to read? When I say a lot of people, I'm probably referring mostly to the younger generation, to the younger peeps. They would be asking me, what would be the best Bible translation or Bible version to read? And it is possibly, quite difficult because of the many Bible translations that we have. If you have the Bible app on your phone, you would see that there is so many Bible translations and versions to read from. And when you have so many options, it makes it so difficult as to choose which one would be the best one to read. And so it all depends on people's preference. It all depends on a lot of other things. But I'm going to be I'm going to be sharing on some of the content that I discovered at Cambridge University Press and some of the things that they would share on various Bible translations that might be insightful and might be able to help you to choose what Bible translation would be best for you. And so I'm going to be sharing a bit on that. But before I share on that, I need to share on a gentleman by the name of William Thurndale. William Thurndale. So William Thurndale is a theologian. He is a preacher, but also William Thurndale was also the first person to translate. He was a translator. He was the first person to translate the Greek and the Hebrew in the Bible, and he translated it into English. So he took the Greek, which was predominantly the New Testament, and he had translated it into English. And he also took the Old Testament, which was predominantly Hebrew, and he translated that into English. One of his first books that he had translated, interestingly, was the book of Romans. And it's a book that is authored by a gentleman by the name of Paul, and it's a beautiful book. It's such a theological book, and it's such a beautiful book. Paul would share that I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it's a power of salvation, first for the Jews, then for the Gentiles in Romans 1. Romans 3 would share that for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Romans 5 would emphasize the grace of God. I think Romans 6, he shares that because of one man's sin, death reigned. Is that Romans? I don't think that's Romans. I think that's Corinthians. My bad. But a lot of stuff that has been shared in Romans. Romans 8 shares quite. It's one of the most favorite Bible scriptures of a lot of people, which would say that all things work together for the good of those who love God, who have been called according to His purpose. But if you understand it contextually, it just has a whole different meaning. Romans 8, my mom's favorite scripture in Romans 8 is Romans 8:31, that if God is for you, who can be against you? So there's so much richness in Romans. Another famous scripture in Romans is Romans 12, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So Romans was a really, really packed book. It's a beautiful book, and it's a packed book. And this guy, William Thurndale, had translated it into English. And a lot of people in high powers, kings and empires, were not really happy with this gentleman by the name of William Thurndale translating the Bible from the Hebrew and Greek. Some of it was also Latin, some of it was also Aramaic, but translating it into English was possibly a problem because they didn't want the Bible to be in the hands of ordinary people like you and I. And so William Thurndale was later killed because of that. He was imprisoned, and then he was later killed because of that. The reason why I share William Thurndale is because it's quite also important to know that the translations that, some translations are closely linked to the English translator of William Thurndale, how he translated it from the Greek to English or from the Hebrew to English. So there are translations that are really, really quite close to Thurndale's translations. And so that's I guess, quite important to know that as well. So, according to the university, or the Cambridge University Press and Assessment team, they were sharing several Bible translations that would maybe be best for you, and they give some insight into those Bible translations. I have possibly 9 of those Bible translations, and I'm going to share lastly on the Bible Project and what they would share on certain Bible versions that might be best for you. So the first one that is shared according to the Cambridge University Press is the English Standard Version, the ESV. To my surprise, they put it as number 1. But the English, or they put it on top, they didn't really specify, like, in numbers, but according to bulletin form, they put the ESV as number 1. So the ESV is a literal translation of the Bible, according to the Cambridge University Press and Assessment. They would say that it is firmly rooted in the tradition of Tyndale and King James. I will elaborate on King James a bit later. But without archaic language. It was published in the beginning of the 21st century, and it is also close to the Revised Standard Version, the RSV. It is well suited for public reading. It is well suited for public reading. In biblical days, when the letters were sent to different cities, and even the Psalms as well, but let me start with the letters that Paul would send. They were publicly read to the entire church, and it was a public reading of these scriptures, and everybody would listen to this public reading of the scriptures. In fact, even the Psalms as well. David, when he was writing some of the Psalms, he didn't write all of them, but when he was writing some of the Psalms, he is probably aware that there would be a public reading of those Psalms. And so that's why Psalm 51 is actually quite profound, if David knows that his sins are going to be read out publicly. So there was a whole public reading of the scriptures and the Psalms as well. And so they would suggest that a well-suited Bible version for the public reading and memorization of the scriptures would be the ESV, the English Standard Version. The second one that they would suggest, according to bulletin form, is the King James Version. The King James Version is the world's most widely known Bible translation. Using early 17th century English. It uses the 17th century English. Very interestingly, that King James was not the author of the King James Bible. Just saying that. He was actually the King of England from 1803 to 1825, but he was also the King of Scotland as well. He actually was the one who authorized this new translation, and he authorized it because it became the people's first Bible. So he authorized it so it can be translated, so it can really become the people's first Bible, so it can be quite readable. Sometimes when you translate things from a certain language to the next, it would sometimes not come out in the right readable way, so I don't know how to give an example, but some of Tyndale's translation, they had to write it in a way that it would be readable, and put it probably in a proper word set up so that we can read it properly, So if I translate something in Afrikaans and I translate it into English, there's some elements that might not make sense, and I need to then translate it in English that would make sense. So why do I go on about this? Is because the King James Version, 84% of the New Testament in the King James Version was also from the original translation of Tyndale. So it was 84% of the New Testament from the King James Version literally comes from Tyndale. And I guess that's, for me, quite interesting. And, it had to be structured in a way that you could be able to read it well. So the closest Bible that is very close to the original translation from Thorndale is the Geneva Bible. So the Geneva Bible is really the closest to the original context, but it's not mentioned in this list. The third one that they would mention is the New American Standard Bible. The New American Standard Bible, which to me actually comes as a surprise. But hey, the New American Standard Bible is a literal translation from the original text, well suited to study because of its accurate rendering of the source text. It follows the style of the King James Version, but uses modern English words that have fallen out of use or changed in its meaning. The New American Standard Bible still uses capital letters for pronouns in relating to divinity. So it's quite interesting for me that it would come number 3, and it does. I understand why as I read from the Cambridge University Press. Number 4 would be the New English Bible. The New English Bible, scholars had translated from the best Hebrew and Greek texts, aiming to present the full meaning of the original in clear and natural modern English. And so that's why they would also put the New English Bible over there. Number 5, one of the Bible that I enjoy using is the New International Version, the NIV. It is the most widely used of any modern Bible version. It marries meaning for meaning principle with word for word rendering. Meaning for meaning principles with word for word renderings. It is straightforward. Contemporary language is both clear and dignified in its style. So it is quite a well-known translation, probably the most well-used Bible translation around the world, according to the modern translations. Number 6, I also enjoy this one, is the New King James Version. It was first published in 1982, and it is a modernization of the King James Version, which was actually published in 1611. It uses the same underlining Greek text from the New Testament. So, yes, I am a fan of the New King James Version. I like it because it still preserves that King James Version style, the words and the phrases, but it just makes it a bit more modern, and you still get the richness of the text. And I also like the fact that the King James Version is 84% closer to the original translation. So yeah. All right, the New Revised Standard Version comes in as number 7. The New Revised Standard Version. The translators made full use of this contemporary Bible manuscript, resulting in a clearer understanding of many obscure passages. It also uses a gender-inclusive language. It's also important to say that it is scholars who actually do this whole translation. It's not just anyone who gets the opportunity just to translate the Bible. You have to be a real theological scholar, a real scholar. Like, you have to be a real scholar, not J. I don't want to insult people, but not to get like a certificate. Now you can translate the Bible, but then you actually have to be a real scholar in the Hebrew and the Greek as well. Okay, the number 8 is the Revised English Bible, the REB, the Revised English Bible. This is according to the Cambridge University Press. It is an updater. It updates the New English Bible. The REB, the Revised English Bible, employs a modest amount of inclusive language and is good for public reading. It is good for public reading. Interestingly, should I share? The REB is a British translation sponsored by all the main Christian denominations. Interesting. Number 9 is Ferndale. If you can get yourself a Ferndale Bible, that would be great, because as I mentioned, William Ferndale, his contribution to the development of the Bible in English is universally recognized. His translation from the Hebrew and Greek scriptures to English to produce enduring quality that underpinned Bible translations in English from the 16th century to the present day. So William Ferndale is really, really quite important, and it would be good to, if you can, get some of his material. I think it would be quite helpful. All right, so that is the Cambridge University Press, an assessment, the Bible's versions and their insights towards that. So I'm going to briefly share on what the Bible Project would share as to what would be the best Bible translations to read. I'm a fan of the Bible Project. I'm a fan of their work. They do absolutely amazing work, and I'm a fan of theology. So when I just see theology come alive, I love it. So, and I love their work. And so they would suggest that this would be probably, they'd give maybe some ideas as to what would be the best Bible translations for you. But they would share some very important things. So they would say the New American Standard Bible and the New King James Bible, for them, a number 2 would give you a weight to matching the original language word for word. So the New American Standard Bible and the New King James Version would give a more weight into matching the original language word for word. Original language word for word. That is quite interesting. Then the NLT, the New Living Translation, and the Contemporary English Version would give more weight to readability. So they're the ones that are mostly used. I've seen a lot of people who have the NLT because it is quite easier to read, and it's, for readability purposes, it is quite a good translation to have. Donnings, Eugene Peterson's The Message translation is also quite interesting, but The Message then takes more of a creative license, and it captures the dynamic thought for thought translation rather than the literal word for word translation. So The Message takes a thought for thought translation rather than the original word for word translation, because it's trying to get the Bible to be a bit more alive according to the Message version. So yes, I guess that this has been quite helpful. You can let me know what would be the best translation for you. You can let me know what would be your thoughts. As I said, prefer the NIV. I would prefer the New King James Version, and the Geneva Bible as well. Geneva Bible is quite difficult to read because it has certain words that are not, certain letters that are not present in the 1500s and the 1600s. And so you'd see, for example, they would write the word serve, which is SERVE. That's the modern one. But in that Bible, in that time, the word V the word V, was quite different, because then they would use the word you, so SERUE. And even when they wrote the word onto, they would not use the word you NTO. They would use the word VNTO. It was different. It was different. They don't use the word J because the word J, the letter J, had only existed, I believe, post the 1500s and the 1600s. So it's quite interesting. So you're welcome to read the Geneva Bible as well. I think it's really quite informative as well. All right. Thank you so much for watching. And please hit me up on the comments. I hope you have an amazing day.